So when it comes to drug and alcohol addiction, we've spoken about, obviously, we want to get to the what's lying underneath. What are the underlying drivers in our survival physiology and our emotional body that are leading to these behaviors? But there's kind of some things to know, with people who are addicted to alcohol and drugs. Whilst they are on them, there is a physical pull. Right, so we don't want to sort of say that there's no physical pull to these drugs whatsoever. There certainly is when you're on them, but every drug addict knows that the issue isn't stopping the drugs; it is staying stopped. The initial the rehab system kind of started based on some very, very old studies, some very, very old science from the 50s, which was when they were giving normal water or drugged water to rats in a cage, and basically they would take the drugged water, whether it be cocaine or heroin, compulsively until they died, overdosed and died. And so all of a sudden, the theory was formed. You take drugs a certain amount of times, you're going to take them until you die. So, and we can get onto, the rat park experiment, which I'll put a link below. Matt and I have spoken about that extensively on other courses. But basically, the rehab industry was kind of born off these first studies because the whole idea was if we take someone away from the substance and the physical, substance leaves their body, then they're going to be okay. Not the case. Because those underlying drivers haven't been dealt with. And that's why, Matt and I and people we've worked with have gone through this process dozens and dozens and dozens of times where the physical drug has left the body, but we still go back to it. Yeah, and it's not because of the physical hook, but there is a physical hook while we're on the drug. Matt, do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, and just to touch on the rack park experiment, I think it would be helpful to explain it in case you haven't done our other courses. So, they took these rats and they put them in isolation, and the rat would choose the cocaine water over food, over everything. It would just drink the cocaine water basically until it died. It would choose that over survival. That's how addicted it became to the cocaine. And that was when a rat was in isolation in a cage by itself. I actually haven't told this experiment in a long time, so let me know if I get it wrong. I can't actually specifically
I can take over if you like.
Yeah, go. And then they put it in a rat park where there's connection and all that, and it would actually choose the water.
Yeah, so Dr. Bruce Alexander in the 70s, so a couple of decades later, he looked at these experiments with which the whole rehab industry was built upon, taking someone away from the substance. And he looked at it and he kind of scratched his head and he said, if I was put in a cage by myself with nothing else to do and there was drugged water there, I'd take the drugged water as well. What else is there to do? So he goes, let me recreate this experiment with a different environment. Okay, so he created what he called Rat Park, which was a wonderful place for rats. There was balls to play with, those little, things they run around in. There was other rats they could socialize with. They could, mate or, bond, all of that kind of stuff. So he built a wonderful environment as opposed to just a cage that a rat sat in by itself. But then he set up the experiment the same in that they had a choice between normal water and drugged water. Now he found that the rats would try the drugged water, but none of them would take it compulsively. None of them would become addicted, and none of them overdosed and died. They would go back to just having the normal water. Why? Because all of these other needs of the rat were being met, right? When the needs weren't being met and they were stuck in isolation in a cage by themselves, they chose the drugged water. When they had their environment set up where their needs were being met, they did not compulsively use the drugged water, and they started just drinking the normal water. Okay, so he recreated that experiment, and it was very, very groundbreaking. It unfortunately didn't change the way the rehab industry treated people too much, but it's a very, very important study. And now where myself and Matt kind of try and think about the next level of that is a rat doesn't have a conceptual mind and a psychological self that it's trying to protect and keep intact, right? We speak about that structure. So then if we are trying to apply that to humans, and we can just say, well, let's just take humans into a different environment. And now that is, and we'll talk about this in a future video of rules with working in addiction, how we do need to change a toxic environment if that is the case. But by taking a human out of an environment and putting it into another doesn't completely solve the problem, right? Because see, when a rat goes from a cage by itself in isolation into Rat Park, it goes, awesome, I'm in Rat Park. I don't need the drugged water anymore. And this is the result that happened in the experiment. What happens when you do that with a human, part of the human stays back in the cage. the vast majority of the time, because that's a traumatic experience for the conceptual mind, the conceptual self, and the traumatized human body. So all of a sudden we might go into a new environment which is less toxic and far better for us, but we still, part of our psyche is still back stuck in the cage. And this is why things like EP become so effective, because now we can start to, have those orphaned parts of us that were stuck in the cage as a metaphor and bring them back into our rap park or new human park that we're trying to create in the now.
Well, that's right. So, like if we apply the model of trauma as an adaptation of the nervous system, we adapt to being in a cage, but then we go back out into Rat Park or into a social environment where everyone loves us. The threat's over. It's like our nervous system hasn't got the point, so we're going to keep choosing the cocaine. And this is where environment is very important, because if we're still in the cage, our nervous system is not going to heal. But when we change the environment and start to work with the nervous system, then we can start to readapt. And there's a quote here by Gabor Mate. So what seems non-adaptive and self-harming in the present was, at some point in our lives, an adaptation to help us endure what we then had to go through. If people are addicted to self-soothing behaviors, it is only because in their formative years they did not receive the soothing that they needed. And I think that sums up addiction right there. It's a self-soothing behavior that at a certain point in our lives was needed in order for our survival. But then we move out into Rat Park, but we're still addicted to those self-soothing behaviors because our nervous system is still stuck in the cage, in the isolation cage. And I, like to use a sort of metaphor. It's like we're riding a bike, we're on a treadmill, and our legs are going, and say that's being in the cage, and then we go out into Rat Park and we don't need to be riding that bike anymore. We don't need to be running. We don't need to be moving our legs. But something in our system keeps going. We're off the bike, but it's continuing out in Rat Park. And it's that movement that we were trying to calm by using the cocaine or the heroin. Maybe not calm or rev up or whatever it is, but we were trying to manage that. And then we move out into Rat Park. In a human being, that's still going. And this is why we say trauma's a loop. In a rat, it stops. But for some reason, our survival drive is very different, and that will keep going. So it's an intelligent idiot. This mechanism, highly intelligent survival instinct, survival drive, but also an idiot because it doesn't know when to stop. It doesn't stop because it's a program playing out.
And then we reinforce that as well, because let's say that we were in some toxic environment or we had a traumatic childhood or whatever it is, and now all of a sudden, okay, you're surrounded by people that love you, there's no threat anymore and that kind of thing. And so people external to us will be telling us, you should be okay now, and we'll be telling ourselves, I should be okay now. But as, like you said, the body's intelligence is still saying not okay, not okay, not okay, even though my environment's changed. And then all of a sudden that kind of perpetuates some guilt and shame because we use that swear word, the should. It's like, I should be okay now, I should be okay now. But the body's like, we're still not okay. And this is why we use EP, because yes, we can change the environment, but we want to have those wheels that are spinning internally, we want to start to slow them down and start to have them stop completely, because it's only when the body goes, I'm safe, or it's over, or my body understands I'm in this new environment, that we'll have that compulsion to escape start to dissipate.
That's right. And so this is the new model of addiction, that's sort of coming out at the moment. And so yes, Rat Park was an important step. That first step is an important step of realizing, yes, the drug's addictive, but then Rat Park takes it to another level. But then like a trauma-informed Rat Park, is the next stage. And that's where we start to see addiction not as a disease anymore, not as a drug, but symptomatic of trauma. It's a trauma response, to try and ease that. And so that's why, everyone knows the feeling, like you can be in a room full of people and feel alone. That's because there's some part of our psyche that is still stuck back in the isolated experience.